Morning everybody, my name's Tony Wickham, I'm the Director of Consult for Barclays. Welcome to the latest in our Explorer series events where we're talking about curiosity, the least practiced intentional state. This morning with me joining me is Ash Hunt from Verizon. Morning Ash.
G'day Tony, good to be here.
Thank you, well, thanks for coming. I said Ash is from Verizon. So Verizon were the sort of company that sort of developed an ISA 360 tool for which the curiosity element is one of the key functions. Just want to give a bit of a background, Ash, to Verizon and sort of what Verizon does.
Yeah, sure. So Verizon's all about partnering with organisations to help them to thrive. That's across lots of different factors like their overall performance, including productivity, quality, sustainability, environmental performance, and also safety performance.
So before we get into talking about curiosity as the sort of least practiced state, it's probably useful for us just to spend a little bit of time talking about the tool itself and what the tool was all about.
Yep.
So two things to look at, I guess, and as with lots of these sort of assessment tools, they're built around a couple of models, and these are the sort of two specific models from an ISA 360 point of view. Model on the left-hand side is a maturity model. There are quite a few of these around. Just sort of explain the reasons why this is a relevant maturity model for the sort of development of ISA 360.
There are several culture maturity models which include safety. Most of them are pretty good, Tony, and they're fairly well known. The reason we chose this particular safety maturity model, it was written in a white paper by Rick Stricker and a few others back in 2010, 2012. It's a really solid white paper. I recommend if anyone's interested in reading that to give us a shout out and we can forward that to you. It's relatively simple for people in the field to understand.
Yep.
So I've ran the results session in organisations with say 100 people in the room of all different levels. Within 15 minutes, people are able to self-categorise where their view of where their culture is at against reacting, conforming, achieving and integral with a really significant degree of accuracy. So it has high face validity and that's really important to us. That's one of the main reasons we chose that.
So there's a lot of this about people understanding the model and where they sit in the model, and obviously it's an increasing process in terms of the maturity. And we get up towards the achieving an integral end. What's the sort of at the high end of the model? What are people really looking at? What would they really see as a high achiever in this model? Yeah.
Well, I might just, if you don't mind, show the evolution of it. So, say with reacting, the most simple way to think about it is we wait for something to go wrong and then we fix it. And that's actually quite a common level of maturity in a lot of organisations. It's not ill-intentioned or anything. It's just people are busy, they're committed to getting things done, and so they just kind of get on with things until something happens. Eventually, once several things go wrong, people start to realise that we actually need some sort of system or process in place that can actually make a difference, and so that's when they start to move into the conforming space. That's an attempt to really control and get some sort of consistency across the way people are operating together. So really, again, it's a step in the right direction. It has some limitations because at an extreme, people in the conforming culture level could have a view that if only everybody followed the rules and the processes all the time, no one would get hurt.
So there's a heavy conformance element to that.
Exactly, So it ends up compliance driven rather than commitment. And of course, some of the limitations there, you end up with a tick and flick type mentality where people feel like there's 9 different processes involved in order just to use a Stanley knife, for instance. So in actual fact, it ends up undoing the good aspects of it.
Heavily reliance on paperwork.
Exactly, And look, you'll have all heard people in the field, they hate paperwork. And in fact, in conforming organisations, when we would be on site and they'd say, so what are you guys here for? And we're like, we're here because we're really committed to people being able to do a great job safely. They go, hang on mate, did you say safety? And we're like, yeah. And they roll their eyes and go, what's that about? And they go, not more safety, mate. It's just rammed down our throats, and so that would be a sign of a conforming culture. Yeah.
And so as we move into achieving and integral, what would we begin to see?
Yeah, so achieving is really another step in the right direction. It's where people are really interested in continuous improvement.
Yep.
And so there's a strong focus on people working in a team, and so there's really good, genuine care at an intra-team level.
Right.
And so they're looking after their own crews. They're working, very hard at getting great performance in their own crews and that sort of thing. The bit with achieving that's limited is one of the best authors around achieving and continuous improvement, a researcher who's passed away now. He showed that more than 3/4 of continuous improvement projects actually fail, as assessed by the very people who actually commissioned those continuous improvement projects. And so in trying to understand why that was, it was because the actual project and the problem with achieving is it only looks at the smaller picture. It doesn't look
go
at
out
the
into
system.
the broader picture.
Exactly.
Which I guess gets us into the sort of integral level.
Exactly. So whilst achieving can be great, some signs for people to keep an eye out, because that'll tell you they're achieving. People say, we did actually take this particular process on, and we worked effectively to change it, and it's much more streamlined, it's much more effective. It just cost us 18 months of our life, and we're pretty exhausted by it. And so if you ask them, was it worth it? They'd go, oh geez, I don't know. Do you feel like you'd be able to take on the next issue? And they go, not in a hurry.
Yep.
So you actually see high turnover in achieving cultures. So there's some real problems with that and limitation.
Potential for burnout.
Absolutely, because there's just so much effort required because the actual system sometimes is pulling in different directions. That's what's distinct there with integral is. Integral is the understanding that an organisation, just like the human body, is a system, and so it's a group of interdependent, interconnected parts.
Yep.
And so it's really both looking at the smaller team, but also how that team interfaces and connects with and works synergistically with all the other parts of the team. So when you can help work crews on the front line get that, and they do, they get it really quickly because they usually get it through complaint. We're all right, mate, but those buggers over there get in the way, they do this, or the design engineers don't understand what we have to do when we're constructing things. And then the maintenance crews go, those bloody construction guys, why did they build it like that?
Yep.
They have no idea how we're now going to have to maintain this thing.
So there's no interconnectedness
Exactly.
or integration there at all.
That's right. Whereas in a integral level culture, it's when you actually get those people together at various points in the design process, in the construction process, etc., and things just work seamlessly.
And I guess that moves us on to sort of the integral model, this sort of 2x2 matrix designed by Wilbur quite a while ago, which sort of focuses on the individuals and the organisational level, and this sort of 4-quadrant element. So the sort of upper level with the individuals and the lower level with the organisation. Just very briefly, how has that sort of been used to sort of help the integral model at the ISA 362?
Yeah, great. So it's interesting because each of the reacting, conforming, achieving and integral levels has its own way of showing up at the belief level, the behaviour level, and then the group and then the system level.
We've got a set of descriptors for each one of those quadrants at each of the individual maturity levels.
Yeah. So it's slightly confusing for folks because there's the integral level, right, which is the highest performing, and then there's the integral model. But look, put simply, the integral model is joining personal and process safety plus other stuff as well. So it's understanding that behaviours are sourced from somewhere, so there are beliefs, values, attitudes, pressures in a culture, and all of these things, and the environment, all of these things impact on how groups of people, how individuals and groups of people actually perform together. And when there are incidents or injuries or fatalities, and you go back and you have a look at what's gone wrong and what led to that circumstance, there's usually, what you'll find is there's aspects of all of those quadrants are actually there's
present.
been an issue. They're all present.
And often what we find is people will spend their time just focusing on one box or one quadrant rather than all of the quadrants.
Yeah. Especially the right-hand side, because it's a bit more visible.
That's right.
So you can actually feel reassured. Oh, that shouldn't happen again, because now we've got another process that's put in place.
So the way that I guess you've used the model from an SA360 is the SA360 is very much about the individual focus. So that focuses on the individual elements in terms of leadership, beliefs and behaviours and attitudes. And then the I-ASK process, which is more of an organisational element. So you're looking at culture and you're looking at systems and the interplay and interconnection between the two. Collectively as a whole, they provide an organisation with a complete assessment. That covers the integral model, but also gives them a very good view of safety maturity.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. The information that gets presented back through the I-ASK is so easy to categorise. The workforce within 15 minutes can look at the information. We can give them a description of the 4 levels of culture maturity and have them self-rate, and within about a 5% error rate, they'll get it. They'll get it right.
So we spent a bit of time talking about the model and the background to the model. I guess one of the obvious questions is, why do we need it?
Yeah.
What are we expecting or intending to guess? And I guess the outcome here is probably the key thing in terms of the understanding of what excellence in performance or safety is. What does the model tell people?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's I was having a conversation early this morning about this same thing. For me, it's really, really clear why we needed to build these tools. And trust me, Tony, we tried not to build these tools for about 5 years before us starting to embark on this process, which has been a pretty full-on experience. We tried to enrol others to build the inventories. So we work a lot with Human Synergistics, and I know Sean, who's the chairperson of that, really well. And we're quite keen for them to actually build these inventories. And it was just too difficult for them for a number of reasons. And then there are a couple other groups as well. And during that period of time, a lot of the work that I do and have done for a long period of time is critical incident response. So when people actually are killed at work, myself and our team responded to those tragic events, and we would fly to sites and we would support the work crews, management, and then my particular role was often to support the family of the loved one who'd passed away. And so that's pretty harrowing, gut-wrenching work, and it hasn't actually changed that much. How many people get hurt, like seriously hurt, and going through those experiences and just knowing that there's something still that's missing in what we have available, that's causing people to continue to take risks, spending time in the field in lots of different projects, whether they be aged care facilities, where the safety performance is horrendous compared to, say, a mining or oil and gas construction type facility. So just being exposed to so many needless and life-changing injuries to the person themselves, but also the family who are either left behind, who have to cope with mum or dad with a permanent back injury or something like that. That's what really motivated us to go, let's try and find a way to build on all of the great research that other colleagues have done in the past, and try and make something that's going to make a positive difference.
And so you've generated a really simple to use, really effective tool that gives people a good understanding about what excellence looks like in terms of safety or performance. And we've spoken about a bit of the sort of background to the tool. Let's just move on to sort of look at a couple of the things that the tool shows us, but particularly in relation to the sort of subject area of curiosity. So that the tool sort of generates 4 capability areas. Commitment is the first one, and we've had a previous session on commitment. in this Explorer series. So anybody that's interested in that, if you search on YouTube and Barclays, you'll find our previous session on commitment. But there are three other elements to it: curiosity, caring actively, and interconnectedness. Just very briefly before we get into curiosity, Ash, just what do we, when we talk about commitment, caring actively, and interconnectedness, what are we actually talking about?
Yeah, so it's interesting, through the research, the AUGPSYCHs and the couple of universities that were involved in working out which of the intentional states, is what we call these things, are actually correlated to performance, so that's excellence in performance. We figured that there'd be a lot more than 4, but as it turned out, there's strong correlations between these 4 intentional states. Commitment is really, each of them have sub layers to them, but put simply, commitment is, the easy bit is, do I want anyone to get hurt? Everyone's going to say no.
That's right.
I'm absolutely committed that no one gets hurt on my watch, you know. And then you ask people, do you believe people will get hurt? And you start to see a pause. And a lot of people will still say, oh, geez, mate, human nature, and lots of other reasons as to why they don't actually believe it's possible.
So they're not prepared to make the commitment.
That's right.
They talk about it.
Yeah. And then, an underpinning methodology that's used, again, from Wilber. Wilber's work is around our beliefs, so that's the integral model. Our beliefs shape and have an influence over our actions, and then actions produce results, right? So there's a cognitive dissonance there around, I don't want anyone to get hurt, but actually I don't believe that that's possible, and therefore I'll behave a certain way, and lo and behold, people get hurt. So commitment, really, what the tool does is it actually makes visible at an individual level, so this is the ISA 360, at an individual level, what my actual deep held beliefs are. So that can be quite challenging for people. And so there's some room to improve that. So if that cognitive dissonance isn't resolved, then we can't, curiosity, people are going to listen in a way that actually self-fulfills their actual belief, right? So commitment is, we need to start there. Second part, though, is then to enrol others inside of that commitment. So not by telling them, but by actually enrolling them in the belief that it's possible, and creating...
And caring actively?
So caring actively is interesting as well, because again, people say, definitely care about my workmates, don't want them to get hurt. When you start asking though things like, what about the crew that's 20 metres that way?
Nothing to do with me.
That's not my crewmates. Different coloured shirts, etc. So the caring aspect is something that really needs to be explored, and again, that comes up through the inventory, both the individual leadership inventory, but also the team. And it's the team that has the strongest correlation to whether someone's actually going to be hurt, or performance is most strongly correlated to team level culture.
And I guess that leads on to interconnectedness, about this sort of caring beyond the individual or the simple crew, it's into the wider team. Yeah,
absolutely. And because the second part, because they cross over to caring actively, which links to interconnectedness, is there's one thing to care, it's another thing to intervene. Right? So the active part is, do I actually go and have a conversation with someone in a way that makes it possible for them to listen and take on whatever the feedback is? And is it possible for us to learn together a better way, or a more safer way to do things, or a more effective way to do things? So there's that component. And interconnectedness is, as you say, it's the systems thinking. It's when our crew does this, how does that impact on all these other groups? And has the system, is the system the contract, like sometimes with big contract organisations, if the contract between them and the so-called client group is suboptimal, then that has a massive impact on then the beliefs of the leaders, who then has an impact on the people in the field. So interconnectedness is that ability to step back and actually look at the whole system.
See the bigger picture.
Exactly right.
Okay, let's move on to having a bit more of a conversation about curiosity. So we set this off with curiosity as the least practiced intentional state. So here's a bit of research that tells us that curiosity has the greatest impact on engagement when comparing leaders who perform differently. So this is a difference between the top and the bottom percentage of leaders, and you can see that curiosity is the difference. But just a bit of a brief understanding about what this research is actually telling us.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting when we get a bit more into the curiosity intentional state that if I just use you as an example, Tony, curiosity involves listening to genuinely understand someone. So whenever you've experienced that in your life, and someone there's different ways to listen to people. Sometimes in the safety field, people want to listen to what you're not doing well.
Yeah.
Right? If someone was listening to you as to what you're not doing well, or you're not doing it right, you're doing it wrong, which is a common thing. What would your experience of that every time you see a leader coming over wanting to be curious with you about what you've done wrong?
It wouldn't be a pleasant experience. It wouldn't be something that you wouldn't feel as though I wouldn't feel as I was getting any value out of that conversation, because it was very much a one-sided process.
Exactly. And most people feel criticised.
Yep.
And so, I'm sure you've been on sites like this too, where people sometimes even have a spotter.
Yes, look out, the leader's coming.
So, it's at the time, it's Smoko, because they know how it's going to roll, and so from an engagement perspective, that's not going to help people feel more valued and engaged. And that's what the research found is that's the norm. Right? That's how people look, and even the leader's not ill-intentioned there.
No.
The leader's genuinely trying to make things more safe. They're just going about it in a way that's not actually having that impact.
They probably have an assumption that they're being curious, or that they're exhibiting curiosity, but in actuality, what's being seen in the field is not curiosity.
That's right. There's a real gap between their intention and their impact.
Yeah.
And that's actually the biggest reason why curiosity is the most difficult of the 4 intentional states, is because people already think they're good at it.
Yeah.
Right? So if you ask leaders about curiosity, and people see that research, they go, "Oh, well, that's great, because I'm already good at this.
I already asked questions. I'm already interested."
That's right.
Yeah.
The opposite is also true when people do genuine curiosity, which is listening to understand, listening to value and respect the other person's views. Those kinds of attributes, the person feels valued, feels supported, and the relationship is really fostered.
So we can see there's a relationship here between people that are curious of a leader and the level of engagement they get from their teams or their employees. We've just started to touch on what do we talk about, what do we mean by curiosity.
Yeah.
But let's just have a look at curiosity in terms of what it is. So there's 3 elements to curiosity. There's a listening element, there's an understanding element, and there's a relationship building element. Let's just tease out, when we talk about listening, Ash, what do we actually mean? What are we trying to tease out from that?
Yeah, so again, this is one of the most difficult skills for people, even though it's something that most people think that we're already good at.
Yeah.
So there's a whole heap of research, I think we might have a little bit of it coming up, around the fact that our brains can process information much, much, much faster than someone can talk, and so we're off making judgments and assumptions and things like that. A lady I was coaching a couple of years back called it assumicide.
Assumicide?
Assumicide.
That's something I've not heard of before.
It's assumptions that really kill a lot of things, like the relationship.
Yep.
It kills curiosity. When we make assumptions, we're not genuinely curious. So listening is a really key part of the curiosity.
So we're talking about listening from a proactive point of view.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Going out and purposefully listening, but also doing it effectively.
Yeah.
So it's not just listening for listening's sake.
That's right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we have with the assessment, our intention to help people and help people be more effective and more safe at work. We built that you use, I know, Tony, a very significant self-development guide.
Yep.
That's got basically, we've picked the eyes out of the best intellectual property that we've come across in 20 years and put it all in that book. Page 71 of that book, it has it sort of joins the dots between listening and seeking to understand.
Yep.
So it's an activity that people can do that really guides them about how to do that well. An example there, Tony, I'll just show you this, something I prepared earlier.
Yes.
So, I better hold that for you folks. Hopefully you can see that. I've asked lots and lots of people over many years. Typically I sort of draw something and then ask them to, what do you see and what do you think most people say?
Blue dot on a page.
Yeah. So they tend to focus on the blue dot, which is essentially some kind of a bias. So if we see a blue dot, then that's the bit we're interested in.
Yeah.
Whereas probably 97 or 8% of the page is white.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we tend to not see that.
Yeah.
So how that works in the field is with curiosity, and when we're having conversations about listening and seeking to understand, generally speaking, if people are going out into the field and they're seeking to understand what's missing or what's not right, what's not going right, then they're going to find it. Seek and ye shall find sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas in the most part, people are doing a lot of good things.
But not going out looking for that.
But we're not generally looking for it.
Yeah.
And so if you ask yourself, when you go into the field and you talk to people who are actually doing the job all day, every day, and you ask yourself, how can I learn something from this person?
Yep.
And then you ask some open questions to really try and understand what that person's experience is. It's incredible what you can learn, and it also gives you the ability to acknowledge and give some praise to the person.
So I guess it's really emphasising that curiosity is very much a two-sided, two-way process. It's not just seeking to understand is not just confirmation. It's actually trying to get a different perspective.
Yeah.
So let's just look at these in a little bit more detail, I guess, just sort of tease out a little bit more of what we mean by curiosity. So listening and the effectiveness of listening, we're generally not great at this. Some research from the University of Minnesota identified that we only typically remember half of what we're told, and after about 8 hours we've probably forgotten about half to a third of it. And as you mentioned earlier, Ash, we generally listen much faster than we speak. What sort of impact does that sort of research have on our ability to be effective leaders in the field? How's it going to impact us?
Yeah, in a very significant way. And one of the amazing things that I've found from field coaching, which is a big part of what you do as well, I know, Tony. So once people have gone through the inventory, of course the diagnostic just tells people where they're at. It doesn't actually help them to improve. So to help them improve, we have to actually do something. And so often the something is field coaching. And so one of the things that I've found is that people who are really, really switched on, so they understand what generally is going on in the field, they tend to be crap at listening.
An interesting observation.
They think they're great, but they practice. When we get out to practice, they'll ask someone, so what are you doing here, and what's working well for you? So they're doing okay, and then they go, so what are some of the issues that are cropping up for you? And the workforce will sort of tend to offer one or two smaller things to just check to see whether or not they're going to be listened to. And generally speaking, luckily, I put some foam over my steel cap boots, because otherwise the guy I'm coaching will end up with a calf injury or something.
Big fat bruise in the back of his leg.
Because they'd be like, go to answer, we go, this is a bit of an issue for us, and then the people who are really switched on, they want to go, let me just tell you how to fix that. And so they'll be jumping right in there, and you can see the workforce eyes sort of, they roll over and they try and be polite.
Yep.
But in actual fact, they're not listening anymore either.
Yep.
And
so you got two people having an exchange, neither of which are listening.
And then we walk away, and the third component to to curiosity that you just showed is relationships. And of course we go, so what happened? What happened to the relationship just then? And unfortunately what happened, even though it doesn't make any economic sense that a leader was going to take time out of their day to go and do something that stuffs up the relationship and has them feel like, or create a bigger gap between themselves and the workforce who are actually getting things done. Yet that's what happens. And so it's a skill that we're poor at it, generally speaking. Without us knowing we're poor at it, and that's why it needs quite a lot of practice.
It's an interesting observation at times when you're out with people that are being curious, but they're spending more time talking than they're actually listening, and that's a sure sign usually that they're actually not being effective in their curiosity.
That's right.
Because you can't possibly be curious if you're talking all the time.
That's right. And little signs like telling, telling someone how they should do something. Is going to go down like flames in a ball of flames as well. So,
Okay. So listening effectively is clearly an important element of curiosity, but it's also something that's quite hard to do, and so leaders need to be a lot more conscious about how they're being curious in the field.
Yeah.
But we've also mentioned sort of in the sort of what curiosity about, talking about seeking to understand. So, the understanding and seeking understanding often is impacted by things we call biases or cognitive errors. We've got 3 examples up there on the screen. Just explain how this might sort of play out in the field. What would people see? How would these biases be impacting effectively what people do when they're out as leaders?
Yeah. So the example I was just sharing there was something like the confirmation biases. I already know what the answer is, and I'm just going to seek information that confirms my view. Of course, when we're listening through any listening filter or bias, it's going to distort the quality of the relationship that we have with the other person. And so the other person, it's really amazing in the field again when you're really tuned in and observing how this works. You can see the moment when the relationship is severed, because the person whom you're wanting to learn from and build a relationship with begins to clam up and become polite, because if it's a boss, but essentially they just want out of that conversation. The amazing thing with the research from the AUKSIKES and the unis, I call it cool science stuff that they keep coming up with. And it's with curiosity, when leaders get it right, one of the other aspects is that the workforce are 57% more likely to suggest improvements in how to do things more effectively and more safely. It's pretty cool, isn't it?
And so my view on that, 57% more likely. They're also equally likely to get that many more new improvements that they would be unaware of, because they're the ones that are at the sharp end.
That's right.
Of understanding how things are really happening in the field.
Yeah. And that has this knock-on impact around how they feel valued. So you just know yourself, when somebody asks you to partner with them to help solve something, and together you figure something out, you feel pretty good about it, don't you? So that's the sort of positive engagement that great curiosity can unlock.
And I think it's, we mentioned there about the impacts on the field-based activity. So it's certainly an interesting and often seen factor that the biases that leaders have can impact the way that they go about being curious in the field. You mentioned about this sort of confirmation bias, where they've already got a decision possibly already formed in their head about the reasoning for something. So then it tends to tailor the questions that they ask and the information that they seek, and the conclusions that they make are already being formed by that lack of curiosity, by already having a decision. Whereas if they go in that with more of an open mind about trying to understand with no predetermined ideas, they're more likely to get a better quality and a more accurate outcome.
That's right. Yeah, one of the videos that I think might have been in the first webinar we did was Donna Buchanan,
Yes.
who was a sponsor at Aruna Alliance for a fairly significant safety transformation program. And that's one of the things that her and her senior leadership team acknowledged was it came up in there. So the individual leaders do the ISA 360 and then you get an aggregate.
Yeah.
So there were 6 of them, I think, 6 or 7 of them did in the senior leadership group. And one of the things that showed up for them that she said in the video that I'm sure folks could go back and find probably on the webinar,
on YouTube,
on the YouTube, was that the senior leaders had a belief that they couldn't trust the workforce to anticipate safety issues and resolve them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, with that belief or that view, when they went into the field, that's their bias that they're listening through.
That's what showed up.
That's what showed up. And so it was really fascinating that once we got a bit of a breakthrough with that, and that's what Donna talks about in the video, the CFO was saying, geez, isn't that amazing? We can put a dollar figure on how much it's cost us to, because they had, I can't remember, 5, they called it job safety visits every month.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I know where you're going with this.
And so and because their sites, like 20-something sites, geographically dispersed, it takes them a fair bit to get to site.
Yep.
This CFO goes, I could quantify how much damage it's cost us to actually do these job safety visits. And so we're spending all this time and money going into the field, positively intentioned, but wrecking the relationship between the workforce and us to the point where it's well documented with those folk. It was delivered at a national conference a couple of months ago by their GM, that the workforce, it's quite common, we're saying the leaders don't understand what we do.
Yep.
And how we go about things, and they confirm it every time they get their butts out on site.
Yeah. And I bet the leaders don't understand why they don't understand.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
And it's that lack of curiosity that's probably the essence of
and
why they don't.
You're spot on. So it wasn't until they actually were confronted through the commitment intentional state at an aggregate level that they went, actually we don't trust that the workforce have got it, and then they would have evidence to back it up.
Yep.
Right? And we went, okay, well, let's get out of a right-wrong conversation, because if we have that, you're just going to produce data upon data that confirms you're right.
Yep.
Let's just have a look at, if you stay right about that, what's the future look like for you and for the workforce? And it's a train smash, right?
Yep.
So we go, so if you want that future, and guess what? You guys are the ones who are in charge of making this company successful. You don't have to change. Keep the view that the workforce are crap, etc.
Yep.
And they're like, but we don't want that future. So, well, okay, let's work on generating what kind of new attitude or belief would you need to have towards the workforce. And of course, they could create that, but then they needed to engage with the workforce in a different way to actually make that new belief something that was believable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when the magic happens. So that's what Donna talks about in the video.
So part of that, I guess, is about from thinking about the perspectives that people have. So again, from seeking to understand, we've got this sort of knower-learner distinction, and this, for me, is all about perspective. What looks like a fairly simple diagram. Just explain what was this trying to explain to us as a leader about the difference between being a knower and being a learner? Yeah,
cool. So, look, anyone who's ever had an argument will get this pretty quickly.
I'm sure they will.
So that means everyone. So think about with kids or with partners or work colleagues, etc. And again, linking back to the type of leader who struggles with curiosity more than most are the ones who are really high IQ. They believe that they're right about something. So that's another distinction we use is, does somebody want to be right, or do they want to be right and effective?
Yep.
Which is a key bit. So with this, if we play this, Tony, we just play a quick game with this and say I'm C and you're D,
yep.
And I'm looking at things from think it's that perspective.
Yes, your side.
From my side. And let's say we're surgeons, and one of our colleagues, we're in an A&E type facility.
Yep.
One of our colleagues, like John, gets rolled in through the ambulance, and we get to run our tests. You've got your team and my team run some tests on John, and we've under time pressure because we're committed to saving John's life.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the results and I go, look, and then we come together.
Yep.
And we go, right, Tony, our team's figured it out. We need a white semicircle treatment plan to save John's life.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you going to say from your D perspective?
I'm going to say from my perspective, we need blue semicircle treatment plan to save his life.
Yeah.
All my tests are showing that it's blue.
Right. So I might double check my results, and of course they'll confirm what I've just.
And I'll do the same and double check my results, and that'll just reconfirm my view.
So we come back together.
Yeah.
And how are we going to have that conversation?
Quickly, because John's dying on the table.
So I'm likely to. I'm right. I mean, I've just double checked. I've got a pretty smart team. Yeah. They've been to uni and all the rest of it. Yeah. So I'm going to be trying to convince you.
That you're right.
I said, look, Tony, I actually really like John. You must think he's an ass because you're trying to give him poison, mate. And so typically what happens is we're not going to be listening here. We're trying to convince each other. Yeah. Good intentions. Yeah. But who is actually right? Are you right, or is my team right?
From that conversation, nobody would really know who was right, because we're only looking at it from one perspective.
That's right. So let's imagine that we butt heads long enough that we think, we need a circuit breaker here. Let's go to the big boss and
bring in a third party.
Let's bring in A. Yep. What's A going to say?
Well, A will say A can see both parts, but only from a certain perspective. They can't see the whole. They're only seeing it from the top of the circle.
Yep. So they go, you're kind of both right. It's half blue, half white.
Yep.
And I go, let's get my head of department's perspective, and we bring in B, and B goes, well, A's the closest. It is half blue, half white. It's just that A doesn't know his left from his right. Because they see it differently, right?
Yeah, opposite side.
So who's right? Again, well, no one. They're just perspectives, aren't they?
Yeah.
Now that's the point here, is really with curiosity. The first part of curiosity, humans hate it, right? Because the first part of curiosity to make it possible is to realise that we aren't actually right.
Yep.
We have a view.
Yep.
And that view is damn important, and it's important enough to share.
Yep.
But not share it that it's a fact, share it that it appears to be a fact, but then get busy learning. How come A sees that? How comes D and B see that?
Because there are other views.
There are other views, and we feel vulnerable when we realise we don't know everything.
Yep.
There's a certain degree of vulnerability there, and that often makes us feel insecure, and so that's why humans feel threatened by it. We don't like it much. So to just make peace with the fact that we need to be vulnerable in order to be able to step back and see the entire picture, then suddenly I can get curious. So Tony, how come you see blue semicircle treatment?
Yeah, because I can't see blue from here.
I just can't see it from here. And you might say, well, of course we use the whiz bang test out of South Africa. And I go, what's that?
Yep.
And you tell me what it is. And I go, I've never heard of the whiz bang test. What's it measure? And all of a sudden I start to see that some blue is going to be part of the treatment plan.
So you're seeing something from, you're effectively trying to walk in their shoes. You're trying to be in their position, trying to see things from their position.
Exactly.
Because that increases your perspective.
That's right.
Therefore you become more knowledgeable, and you're using curiosity to do that.
Exactly right. Now, one of the things that the research show is when you're in a leadership position, most people believe that they're right because they've often come from the tools.
Yep.
So they believe that they're right, and the further up the food chain people go, the more ignorant we are. So there's a phenomenon, the iceberg of ignorance. The more ignorant we actually are. So we can't see what's actually happening for many people in our business. where the rubber's hitting the road. So knowing that means we can actually get out there, share our views, but really get curious and learn what's going on for other people.
And I think that's a strong sort of message for people that have been in technical positions or technical roles or have been promoted because of their technical capability as they move through the leadership chain, is that they need to increase their ability to be curious, because they are getting further away from the usefulness of their technical skill.
That's right.
But they can't, often they don't break that connection, and they're still trying to use their strong technical skill to control situations.
Exactly. And the last bit of this curiosity, intentional state, really links to we can actually become curious with ourselves. So with our own relationship. So you can probably flip to that next slide there, Tony.
So this is about being sort of building relationships.
That's right.
And that relationship performance issue.
Yeah. And so we have a relationship with ourselves.
Yep.
Right? So, for instance, something that I struggle with is risk perception and then risk tolerance.
Yep.
As a young bloke growing up in the bush, my upbringing was she'll be right, mate. I sometimes wonder how I managed, and my family managed to get through as relatively unscathed as we did with the sorts of things that we used to get up to. So knowing that about myself, I can actually, when I'm in certain environments or just, when I'm conscious, I'm able to say, hang on, just pause for a second and get curious. What am I not seeing in this situation? What are some risks that I'm just not even
blind to?
I'm just blind to. And what's something that could happen here that I'm not even contemplating? So it's just a moment, just to pause and getting curious with myself. It's amazing how that's been a benefit, a significant benefit for my own life. And then teaching our kids, like our eldest has just learnt to drive, so helping her to, before she gets in the car, especially on a longer trip, to just spend a couple of minutes, kind of getting present with her own mindset and planning the journey and a few things like that. I believe makes her a lot more safe. So curiosity, yes, it's with others, it's also with ourselves.
So I guess you're building on the sort of three key skills there about the RAG, respect, empathy and genuineness. And the key role that they play in both building relationships but also being curious. And how curiosity turns up is an element of showing people respect. It's being empathetic to not seeing things from their point of view, but also that genuineness of that caring attitude and being genuine in the interest that you're taking with the individual, doing it from a genuine point of view, not from other motives.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ACID test we talk about there is caring for work colleagues as if they're family. And so the thing there is, I can think of a guy up on a site a crew that were doing some cable pulling under extreme pressure, and they were behind. They had a sort of a fence that was that you'd see around town here, like just a makeshift fence, and that was going to be one of the barriers of protection for them, and a whole heap of other things, and so we were trying to understand, what was going well for them and what was making them this job more safe and effective, and how could they be even more safe. And one of the things one of the guys was saying is, when I said, so he happened to mention he has an 18-year-old apprentice, son who's an apprentice. I said, how'd you go with him operating this winch? He goes, oh shit, no chance of that, mate. I said, how come? He goes, for starters, we'd need this. I'm like, wow, okay. Yet you're okay to be operating it? I've been doing it for years and stuff. And it's just interesting to bring that level of curiosity to people, and then, how do you think your son would go if you wore this? If the sock, took your head off, how's that going to be for your son? Oh yeah, no, that's no good. What do you reckon, if he was here, what would he say? What would he want you to do? Dad. And then suddenly this guy's like, all right, let's stop this job and let's get this thing in place.
The curious thing about that is that the actual understanding about what needs to be done and the actual ability to be able to do it is fundamentally already there.
Absolutely.
It's the realisation of, I guess the realisation of why am I not doing this, and if it was my son that was doing this work, then maybe I would approach it in a different way.
And just having someone else there, Tony, I think, who's creating a bit of space. This is an amazing opportunity for leaders and peers as well, to actually just create that tiny little bit of space for people to reflect, and then there's some sort of subtle permission that it's okay. It's okay to just stop things and make things more safe.
So I guess we've sort of, as we get towards the end of our hour, we're just sort of drawing this to a close now. About how does curiosity play out in the field? So we're beginning to touch on what leaders might see or might do to be able to demonstrate or exhibit or show genuine curiosity. And I think one of the things we've touched on lightly is this sort of the power of the type of question and the questions that they ask. What sort of questions would you expect in terms of the way that they frame them? What sort of questions would you expect leaders to be asking for them to be able to be demonstrating curiosity?
So questions that that we've put in the self-development guide that we find really powerful are questions about what's going well already, questions around competence, and then questions around that seek to understand other people's views, so open questions. And it's really funny, it sounds so easy, doesn't it, like an open question. But then when you get people in the field and have them practice asking open questions, they realise it's actually a little more difficult than they think it is. But as you say, one of the key indicators of asking really good questions, open questions, is the other people. They literally say to me and whoever I'm with in the field, they'll go, "So you really want to know, do you, mate?" I'm like, yeah. And that's the first sign that they go, actually, this isn't the typical, "G'day, mate, what are you doing? How's it going? Any issues?"
It's the tick boxing exercise.
That's right, And look, my view, maybe it's a bit contentious, but my view is often people feel, particularly men, feel uncomfortable asking open questions with other blokes in so as the picture shows, there's some sort of a construction and mining type environment. They sort of feel more comfortable going, mate, how's it going? Good, that sort of thing. There's some vulnerability when asking, when really it's kind of challenging someone to think and share. So you go, so what are your thoughts on how we could get this job to be more effective and more safe? And then pause, and the person's going, no, it's pretty good really, right? That's the social cue for the leader to go, right, no worries, I'll see you later then, because they feel uncomfortable.
That's right. I'm uncomfortable and I'm vulnerable.
Whereas, of course, when you're in curiosity, you're like, have a think, mate. Have a think for a couple of minutes.
So I think the challenge with that, Ash, is staying in the open curiosity phase for long enough to be able to tease out the answers from the individuals that you're having a conversation with.
And then it's floodgates, Tony.
That's right.
It's floodgates, because you really want to know, do you, mate? You're like, really do. Really interested, because my guess is you got some pretty good experience here. Like, right. And then they'll test you with one or two things to see whether you're actually going to really listen. And then when you do, it's like, boom, they'll get to the real guts of it. And then it's amazing. So there's content, they'll tell you about how to do it more efficiently, but really what you're getting is the relationship is going to be, there's that psychological trust that gets formed, and then with that relationship, it won't be just that one bit of content.
You'll get a whole lot.
You get a whole heap.
Ash, our time's nearly up, so we've touched on quite a lot, but we've only probably just scratched the surface from a curiosity point of view. So just in the last 5 minutes, we just open it up for anybody to, if you've got any questions, by all means, feed them through on chat, and we'll see if we can answer them in the last 5 minutes. Any sort of final thoughts in terms of curiosity? How would you sort of summarise that last sort of 60 minutes in terms of the key elements?
I suppose the key bit would be, one, we know from the research it has the biggest impact, positive impact. 2, it's the most difficult one to do.
Yep.
So, because we think we're already good at it.
Yep.
So, those 2 factors, I think, really make a compelling case to have people, one, do the inventory so that they can understand where are they currently at with regards to all the people that are around them that are important, and then 2 is get into some skill-based work to actually improve curiosity. And when those 2 things happen, the results are phenomenal.
Yeah. I think the interesting reflection for me is that we probably spend a lot of our life asking questions.
Yeah.
But yet, despite all of that practice, we're still not great at being curious. Because I think we just don't spend enough time in the curiosity phase of asking questions.
Yeah.
Back to the sort of biases that we naturally have.
Yeah.
We're asking a question often with an ulterior motive in mind,
Yeah.
or a decision process which is just being used to confirm the decision,
Yeah.
rather than being open to there's different perspectives here.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't know all the answers, or maybe we don't have all the information that we need to be able to make the best decision.
And that requires, like we talked about before, a lot of emotional intelligence to actually be at peace with the fact that I don't know,
Yep.
and it's not possible for me to know everything, and therefore I need to actually develop a listening to understand. As soon as I think, that's the thing with Noah, as soon as I think I know something, boom, that's the end of learning.
Yep.
It's not possible. You know?
That's right. Ash, thanks very much for turning up and great views and conversation.
Thanks, Tony.
We've not had a lot of questions from the audience, just a couple of thank yous. So thanks everybody for sort of dialing in and spending an hour with us. Hopefully you've got something out of that process. There's a way of staying in touch. We've got a LinkedIn group, and certainly in the next couple of days, the video of this conversation will be up on the web, so people will be able to get access to it. Keep the conversation going. If you've got any questions in the next few days you want to ask us, by all means jump into our LinkedIn group, and Ash and I will sort of endeavour to answer the details. So thanks everybody. Hope you have a good rest of the day.